And for the first half, it looked like I was right. Not a whole lot of offense going on at all. 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns put this game out of reach. Jamal Charles with a 39-yard rush, and then Alex Smith, the fleet of feet, Alex Smith, with an 8-yard TD run to put the nail in the coffin. But for the Kansas City Chiefs, you look at the comparison. The Chiefs ran for 127. The Bills ran for 111. Kyle Orton passed for 259. Alex Smith only passed for 177. So give and take, nudge, nudge, push, push. It ultimately came down to the Chiefs finding a couple of big plays, or really one big play if you want to count just the Charles 39-yard touchdown run.
Mm-hmm. And, Orton had a good game, but I think they just did not run it quite enough. I mean, he threw the ball 48 times. For a quarterback like Kyle Orton, that's just, and I don't know, in my opinion, it's a little too much. Their defense played well, and it just didn't seem like they were really controlling the clock. I mean, mind you, that it was only a minute off, but I know they're missing C.J. Spiller. Fred Jackson came back, but he's not 100% yet. Didn't really see himself. So I don't know. It was weird. It was an interesting game to watch because I couldn't really tell what team wanted to win more until the very end when Kansas City just turned it up a little bit.
But that's what made this a great football game. I think we all had agreed it'd be a low-scoring, tight game. I think I took the Bills and you boys took the Chiefs, but the reality was it ended up being exactly what we all thought it would be. And maybe if there was another 5 minutes in the game, maybe the Bills win this game.
Or maybe
that's just not the way it is.
Maybe if Bryce Brown would have actually held on to the football as he crossed the goal line.
Yeah, wow, you sound like a bitter Bills fan.
You know what? I hate plays like that where it's a matter of simple fundamentals.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Cover the ball up. You're not over the goal line yet.
And that's the thing is the Bills really controlled this game. If you look at stats as far as team statistics, they controlled this game in every aspect except they had 2 more turnovers. And really it was those 2 turnovers that cost them the game.
Yeah. I want to talk about 2 aspects of games that really just left me with sort of a memory of this week. And the first one was the change that the Green Bay Packers had made to their defense by moving Clay Matthews to the inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just the simplest little thing. It ended up looking like the most brilliant move by Dom Capers. And it really just changed the face of their defense. Suddenly, they were able to pressure to the inside, to the outside. Nobody really knew where it was coming from. Their defensive line not only was outstanding in rush defense, but, man, their pass defense was just incredible. I mean, put to the side the game that the Bears had, but they looked like a legit defense that could take the field with most teams. And
that's terrifying for other teams.
Yeah.
So wait, you're telling me there's a way to coach a defense to improve performance?
What I'm saying is I thought that the one personnel change really did make a difference for the Packers.
Right. So
I know where you want to go with this, but I'm not going to bite.
Come on.
Really cheap undershot that you're throwing out there.
That was a cheap.
It's possible.
Was a cheap undershot.
It's possible for a defensive coordinator to make an adjustment that works, as opposed to Mel Tucker, who in 2 seasons has underwhelmed as Chicago Bears defensive coordinator. Last year I was willing to give him a pass because he was playing basically with Lovie Smith's players, and I don't think Tampa 2 scheme is really where he wants to be. But this year, with all of the defensive player acquisitions and a full season under his belt with these guys, I really expected a whole ton more from this defense, as I'm sure everybody else did.
Sure. But, I still wanted to talk about a couple things before we got to that.
Oh, sorry. See, I told you. This is why I gave the controls to you at the beginning, because if you let me have this...
I said I wanted to talk about a couple of things, and one of them was the Packers' defense. The other thing I wanted to talk about was... oh, boy, I'm looking at the games right now trying to remember. One of them was the Miami-Detroit game, but there was one other thing I wanted to talk about. Oh, it was the Jets. Yeah. Not that this is earth-shattering, but they did enough against Pittsburgh first. I mean, they shut down the Pittsburgh offense, which nobody expected 6 touchdowns this weekend, but I expected 2 to 3.
Right.
Yeah.
And they really did enough that even when I did the waiver wire report, I'm just waiting for the final stats on the Eagles for my recommendation of picking up Mark Sanchez off the waiver wires, which I made last week, by the way. They made me hesitate about looking how I looked at them and how I looked at other teams going into the next few weeks. Because if that defense was phenomenal. That defense can play like that. It's a Jets team that can do something to make a little bit of noise here in the stretch.
Right.
So that was the second thing.
So I got to ask you, because you brought something up when you mentioned Mark Sanchez.
Oh, yeah.
With the way he's performing tonight, is this potentially a quarterback controversy when Foles is healthy? Because he's playing phenomenal this evening. Against, I know that Carolina's not the defense it used to be, but they're still a decent team, and he's shredding them right now.
Yeah. I don't know. Here's the thing. I think this is real because there was at least one report that I didn't really get to investigate that I thought had something to do with the idea that maybe the management of the Eagles did not care for Nick Foles this season. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, this is going to be up to Chip Kelly. If he's sitting there saying that in Sanchez, let's say they win the rest of the games for the rest of the season and they're blowing teams away, and Sanchez is in charge, I don't know why you would switch. Why would you? You'd sit there and go, we're doing just fine. Take a seat, and if something happens to him, then we'll throw you in, you know?
Right.
I kind of feel good for Sanchez. After the circus that he went through with the Jets, it's nice to see kind of a resurgence. I mean, I was never a huge Sanchez fan, but I feel bad for anybody that went through that mess that he was with Tebow and whatnot with the Jets. It's kind of nice to see him kind of have a little bit of the limelight back.
Well, if anything, it illustrates just how important the complete team is in football.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you're talking about Sanchez, the same guy with that, you know, was committed the butt fumble. You know what I mean? And that kind of characterized or came to personify his time in New York a little bit unfairly. You know, as embarrassing as that play was, but now it's like, oh, look, Sanchez can play. Well, he's on a team that executes their offense really, really well. And even when I think Sanchez's first two seasons were somewhat respectable, it was never executed like what the Eagles do on offense.
Yeah.
Well, it also shows that he can be a systems quarterback if he's in the right system. And you could sit there and say that when he was with the Jets his first couple of seasons, he did well because he had a great defense. They had an effective running game. I mean, he also had LaDainian Tomlinson, who had a resurgence in his career at the time that he could rely on. Yeah. I mean, they had two great running backs. They had a decent enough passing game. He didn't have to make any mistakes, and they had a great, great defense. That's not the same thing that's going on right now. You actually have an offense with the Jets that's trying to be creative, that's trying to generate points, and they're being very unsuccessful. In their unsuccessfulness, they're putting the defense on the field way too long. Too long. So, you know, right now, Mark Sanchez, all he's proven to me is that he can run Chip Kelly's offense. Right. And that he can run it successfully.
Right. It's being the right seat on the bus, as we like to say at the day job. Finding the right seat on the bus for people.
Get on the bus.
Yes.
Spike Lee joined.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah, no, I know. I can't help it.
What are we thinking about the Dolphins after losing that Lions game? Some question marks raised about the Dolphins, or is it just you win some, you lose some?
I think it's the latter, me personally. And my initial big concern is really the loss of Albert, left tackle.
I'm looking for it now. Brandon Albert.
Sorry, Brandon Albert. Yeah, Brandon Albert. Sorry. How did we know this? That was kind of funny, actually. The loss of Brandon Albert. How could he miss the guy? Anyway,
Bazing.
So, you know, that was initially a concern of mine, but I think they did enough once he left the game that they should be okay. They can remain competitive, and they need to prove that this week. coming up. If they can prove that, then I think I wouldn't worry about them. That was just one of those games you lose to a team whose defense is playing at a high level, and offensively with Calvin Johnson. I mean, I think they're a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I mean,
Calvin Johnson and the rest of the team.
Yeah, but
they've got some great players right now, and they're executing really well.
When Calvin Johnson's back, obviously, and this is no great, big, deep analysis on my part, it's a totally different team, totally different offense.
Yeah. And especially because Golden Tate has proven himself to be a very good number 2 option. So now that's going to open up more for Calvin Johnson because Tate had some huge games when Johnson was out.
I'm sorry. I'm distracted because Monday Night Football has sunk to a new low as John Gruden is now making a protein smoothie on the air. That's how bad this game is.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's how bad this game is going.
So by the way, Cam Newton, he won my fantasy game for me. He threw a touchdown at Calvin Benjamin. God bless him.
You're kidding me.
You're not. So
there are miracles.
Bing.
So
what's that?
You're a genius, is what you're saying.
Well, I thought
you said a bing on the air. Oh my God.
Jeez.
And God bless. I mean, seriously.
My gosh.
If I would have lost this game, I would just not be a happy man. Anyway.
All right. Do we need to talk about... go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So that having been said, I was going to ask if you fellas had seen the Mark Trestman press conference, which I would encourage anyone, especially a Chicago Bears fan, to go watch, because I think there's just a lot of people overreacting right now as to what has happened with the Bears. I think there's a reaction that needs to occur, but before we start fires and start knocking buildings down and burning things, I think we need to just give them one more week and see what happens.
Well, it's too late.
You can find it on thebears.com, by the way. That's where you find it.
I mean, my one point on the Bears is that the shallow and analysts will just point fingers and say Jay Cutler sucks. Well, yeah, he did not play well yesterday, but at the same time, nothing went right for the Bears. They didn't execute on anything, and yes, they finally ran a kickback for a touchdown. So maybe you want to think that special teams worked, but when you...
By the way, let me interrupt. Did you see that kid run that kick back?
Yeah, it was great.
Oh my God, he was fast. He just ripped right through the special teamers.
When you get 8 kickoff return attempts, you're going to figure out one of them.
I know, but he was fast. I was stunned.
Yeah, no, he's got speed. It's always been with the Bears special teams this year. It's always been a matter of running the ball out way too deep in the end zone, blocking doesn't execute, and you get tackled at the 15, and you just want to bash your head through a wall. It's just like the days of Devin Hester being back there are gone.
Glad I'm not your house.
Oh God, it was bad. I'm sitting there. My poor wife was exhausted because she got a bummer of a work schedule, so she just exhausted. So she had passed out on the couch, and I'm watching the game, and I'm like, you got to be bleeping me. And it was just one thing after another. The blown coverage on Jordy Nelson the first time, and then the second time, it's like, what are we doing? If you can't execute a basic coverage check and not realize that, I'm the safety, I've got the deep half of the field over here, I need to cover this guy that's running by me. It's pretty clear that they were not on the same page, and I guess we don't know who was wrong on the first one, whether Tim Jennings was supposed to be in cover 3 and he shouldn't have passed on Jordy Nelson. Doesn't matter right now because you just look like a bunch of inept idiots. You don't have a football team out there on the field. You have a giant mess. It's like if you take this 5-star meal and put it in a Tupperware container and nuke it for 15 minutes, the Tupperware is just going to melt. No one's going to be able to eat anything, and that's what the Bears are, a Tupperware-covered 5-star meal.
Yeah. But now here's the thing, and this is the only thing I'm going to say about Jay Cutler. It's the only thing I'm going to say about... I know, how can I follow Tupperware?
Yeah, how can
the only thing I'm going to say about Jay Cutler, and I don't want to start an argument. This is just going to be a base statement. The reason why he gets all the garbage he does, and he will always, just like all quarterbacks do, when you're making the kind of money he makes and you don't play a solid, consistent game, you will always